Hi, I'm David Carroll. I am a retired Air Force colonel with 25 years. After I retired from the Air Force, I worked for Target in a fulfillment center as a senior group leader, and I'm currently a owner-operator of a Chick-fil-A restaurant. Today, I'd like to just talk a little bit about leadership, how to be a leader in the workforce, how to get along with others, and then maybe just some tips on the interview process. How to be a leader. In my opinion, bottom line is people want to be appreciated. They don't want to be impressed. A simple thank you in the workforce goes a long way to motivating people. You also want to mentor and invest in others. You want them to be better people, better leaders in the workforce, get along with people. So you need to identify their strengths and weaknesses and give them feedback as they do their jobs. A true leader, in my opinion, has a servant heart. They truly want to help others succeed and help the business succeed. They should set high standards. Leaders should set high standards by setting the example for others. You need to walk the walk and talk the talk. Integrity, you can't rise above your character. Integrity has to be first. How to get along in the workforce? In my opinion, the bottom line is you always have to be professional and never judge others. You need to seek to understand. If something goes wrong, you need to seek to understand before you pass judgment on others. And then communicate constantly. You have to have an open dialogue with your boss, your coworkers, and always be able to have an open door policy where people can come and talk to you about any problems or situations that they might have. In the interview process, always be professional. You want to dress professional when you go into an interview, of course. You need to speak clearly and concisely. And you can't prepare enough for an interview. You really should have 4 or 5 really good examples of your leadership where you took an event or an activity and just really took it to the next level. And then you need to be able to plug or play your answers into any question that the interviewer might ask you. And so you're going to start with, in the interview, start with your elevator speech. This is basically a 2 to 3 minute talk about your family, your background, your work background, and then also your educational background. Just 2 to 3 minutes to give them a clear, concise picture of who you are. And then most interviews are situation, behavior, outcome type interviews. So the interview is going to ask you, tell me about a time when you did this or something happened to you. So you should be able to tell them what the situation was, what your behavior was based on that situation, and then a clear, concise, conclusive outcome of the situation. You want to be able to quantify it. For example, after I did this activity, our organization was able to get 20 outstanding ratings out of 30 criteria, so something to that effect. And basically, with those simple steps, I think you'll be able to be a better leader in the workforce, get along better with your coworkers and your boss, and establish yourself as a good candidate in an interview. Thank you very much.
Leadership is about managing change. It's 3 qualities that I view in leadership. When I think of leadership and the qualities that an individual should have, I tend to think about personal power that an individual holds. So I tend to think of 3 in particular. The first one being expert power. Expert power is the individual's capacity to understand expertise within their particular field or area of responsibility. Oftentimes, as a leader, you may not hold the expert power, but as a leader, understanding where that expert power exists and how to leverage it for the success of the organization is critical. The other personal power quality or of a leader that I think is important is attraction. And I'm not talking about the physical attraction of an individual. I'm talking more about the admiration and respect that an individual has and is received by others. Attraction can be very positive. It can be wordsmithing. It can be the way that you talk and present yourself to others and show them that you care. And this has an incredibly powerful influence on subordinates and can change someone from simply being a manager into a leader. The last quality I think is important is effort. Um, Effort is a combination of your commitment and your motivation. And by combining commitment and motivation together and showing a effort level that motivates those and influences those around you, you go and move the organization to a point that you want to be in the future. Leadership is about change. Management's about complexity. So leadership is about moving from point A to point B. Leadership is not stagnant. And effort is a driving force on how we accomplish change. 3 tips. So 3 tips on how to get along with others. Well, first and foremost, I think the forgotten skill when getting along with others is listening. Okay, listening is not the same as hearing. Hearing is a passive process. You can walk down the street and you'll hear a lot of noises. You'll hear a lot of things going on. Listening is an active process. It's selective. And there's kind of a couple components to it. You receive the information, you understand the information, you attend to it, you understand the information, and then evaluate it. Figure out, what does this mean? And then from there, listening actually involves response. What do I do? Am I engaged in the conversation? Am I listening to them, or am I nodding my head? Am I hearing it, but there's no active approach? Am I doing anything with the audible messages coming through my ears? The next tip I would say to get along with others would be to know your own behavior or personality characteristics. And what I mean by that is to know how you come off to others. Are you a more forceful person? Are you more agreeable? Do you tend to be more analytical in your style? Do you tend to be more compassionate and caring and emotionally attached to things? And then how do you identify that in others? And what are the strengths and weaknesses associated with that? I think by understanding that an individual maybe is more analytical, the way you present the information to them should be different. And the conflicts that could arise from not identifying that will be reduced. And the last thing that I think is important as far as getting along with others would be know how to navigate conflict. We're human beings. We're going to disagree. We're not all going to have the same opinions. We're not all going to think the same. So we need to be able to identify what is the source of the conflict between us. And then we need to identify some techniques in order to overcome that conflict. Now, there are things such as compromising. There's things such as cooperation. There's things such as forcing, where you just tell someone this is the way it's going to be. And I think all of these different techniques for managing conflict can be used and applied in different areas. Obviously, the most used would probably be compromise, but the most ideal would be, cooperation, where we collaborate and come to an agreement that's a win-win for everyone. A compromise is a lose-lose. We both don't get what we want. The unfortunate reality is a lot of time a compromise may be good enough to get us to where we need to go, and we may not be able to get to the point where we can collaborate and we can cooperate. Finally, job interview tips. So what would be my tips for a job interview? I think the first thing you need to do is you need to prepare. You need to do your homework on the company or the organization that you are going to be interviewing for. You need to know what their mission is, what's their industry, what's their core competencies that they have, what do they do really well, what's their values within the organization. Do they value, innovation? Do they value creativity? Do they value analytical skills, engineering? So, if you went to interview for Apple and you talked about wanting to work for a telecommunication provider, well, Apple is not a telecommunication provider. They're a technology company. And that would be an example of something not doing your homework, not understanding the environment of the organization in which you want to be part of. The next thing I would say for a job interview skill would be, or tip, would be to listen. Again, listen to the questions that are being asked of you, and truly listen to them, process them, understand what they are. And if you don't understand the question, ask them to rephrase it. Ask them, so are you asking X, Y, and Z? And make sure that you fully understand what they're asking before you go on a tangent and start to answer the question. And they say, that's good, but that's not really what I want. Which brings me to the next one. Think before you speak. You want to think about the question and have a thoughtful expression as far as, this is what I believe, this is what I think, these are the things that I would do in this situation, or this is how I will better your organization, this is how I will contribute $20 to your organization, and you're only going to have to pay me 10 for it. And the last but not least is really represent who you are, your brand, your personal brand. That your brand is, how are you perceived by others? How do others think of you? So one of the things is, obviously you want to dress for the occasion. You want to, wear your suit, wear your nice, business formal attire. Make sure that you have, haven't eaten anything offensive. Garlic or curry right before an interview would be a bad move. And show your best possible self so that their initial impression of you is someone who is competent, trustworthy, and again, you start to build one of those personal qualities I talked about as far as attraction. By dressing better, by showing yourself in a clean, well-presented way, you're going to be able to build up that personal power basis that will give you an advantage over another interviewee who maybe didn't take the time to learn how to